There comes a moment, usually somewhere in the second half of life, often in the quiet after the children have grown and the career has peaked, and the busyness that filled every available space has finally begun to thin, when there is nowhere left to run. When the distractions that worked for decades are no longer sufficient. When the noise that kept the inner life at bay goes quiet enough that the inner life itself begins to surface. For some people, this moment is the beginning of the most profound and most genuinely satisfying chapter of their lives. For others, the ones who have been running the longest, from the things they buried the deepest, it is the most frightening thing they have ever experienced. Buddha said this moment was not to be feared, it was to be welcomed, because it is the moment, the long-postponed, always inevitable moment, when the real work and the real living can finally begin. What are people running from?
Buddha was specific. Most people, when examined honestly, are running from some combination of the same things. The grief they never fully felt, the anger they were never allowed to express, the shame they absorbed from experiences or messages or people who had no right to define them but did, the authentic self they suppressed in favor of the self that was acceptable, manageable, and approved of, the fear of insignificance, the terrifying suspicion that when everything is stripped away, there might not be enough there to justify the space they take up. These are not small things. They accumulated over a lifetime. And they were buried under a lifetime's worth of activity, achievement, obligation, and distraction for very good reasons that made complete sense at the time. But here is what Buddha knew and what the second half of life has a way of confirming. The things that are buried do not stay buried. They resurface in the depression that arrives after the career ends, in the anxiety that fills the space where busyness used to be, in the inexplicable sadness that visits in the early morning hours, in the sudden, overwhelming awareness of time passing, of all that was not said and all that was not lived, and all that was not fully inhabited while the opportunity was present. The inner life that was postponed does not give up. It simply waits. And when the external scaffolding thins enough, when there is finally enough quiet, it comes forward, ready to be met, ready to be healed, ready, finally, to be lived. The first teaching Buddha gives for this moment is the most important one. Do not run again. Whatever arises when you finally stop, the grief, the regret, the fear, the long-postponed authentic self. Meet it. Not all at once. Not without support. But with the willingness to finally, after all this time, be present for your own inner life without immediately reaching for a distraction. This willingness, this simple, profound, counter-instinctive willingness to stay, is the beginning of everything. Because healing, growth, and genuine peace are all waiting directly on the other side of the running. They always were. They were just inaccessible from inside the movement. The second teaching is about what Buddha called the practice of kind attention. The inner material that surfaces when you stop running is almost always material that has been waiting for exactly this: genuine, warm, non-judgmental attention. The grief needs to be felt, not analyzed. The shame needs to be seen, not confirmed or rejected, but simply seen, held in the warm light of honest, compassionate awareness until its power to wound begins to diminish. The authentic self needs to be given space, real space, not the space between obligations, but genuine, protected, unhurried space, to emerge, to stretch, to discover what it actually wants after decades of being told what it should want. Kind attention is not therapy, though therapy can be one form of it. It is the practice of turning toward your own inner experience with the same quality of warm, patient, genuinely interested attention that you would offer a person you deeply loved who was finally, after years of silence, telling you what they had been carrying. That quality of attention, directed inward, is transformative in ways that nothing else can quite replicate. The third teaching is about the specific liberation that only the second half of life makes possible. Buddha taught that genuine freedom, the freedom from fear, from approval-seeking, from the desperate performance of an acceptable self, requires a certain amount of living to become genuinely available. You cannot truly stop caring about what people think until you have cared enough and suffered enough from that caring to understand at a cellular level that it was never worth the cost. You cannot truly release the past until you have carried it long enough to feel exactly how heavy it is and how little it serves you. You cannot truly live for what matters until you have spent enough time living for what does not to understand the difference with your whole body rather than just your intellect. The second half of life does not arrive with only losses. It arrives with gifts that the first half could not yet offer. And the greatest of these gifts is the specific kind of freedom that comes from no longer needing to prove anything to anyone, from having lived long enough to know what actually matters, from having lost enough to understand what cannot actually be lost, from having carried enough to finally be ready to put it down. Stop running, turn around, face whatever has been following you, not with dread, with curiosity, with compassion, with the understanding that whatever is there has been waiting patiently, faithfully, and with complete confidence in your eventual arrival. Meet it with the kindness you would offer anyone who had been waiting that long. Because the thing you have been running from is not your enemy. It is the most important part of you, requesting the meeting that will finally allow you to be whole. Save this and share it with someone who has been running long enough and is finally ready to stop. Subscribe to Tathagata Wisdom, because every single day we bring you the wisdom that makes the turning around not just possible, but the most important and most rewarding thing you will ever do.